The bus left a cloud of dust as it turned down the road, leaving Daniel alone by the gate. He adjusted the strap of his old duffel bag and looked over the fields that stretched toward the horizon. It had been almost 2 years since he last came to this village. His wife's childhood home, a place of slow time and weathered fences. The air smelled of cut grass and river mud. He didn't come for pleasure. The doctor's letter had said that Anna, his mother-in-law, needed help around the house after her fall. His wife couldn't leave her job in the city, so Daniel came. The house looked smaller than he remembered. The white paint had faded to a soft yellow ivy climbing up one side. A few chickens pecked near the porch. And there she was, sitting on the bench in the shade, her cane leaning against the wall. Anna looked up slowly. Her silver hair was pinned back, her skin pale and fine like paper. But her eyes, those steady gray eyes, were bright and alive. "Daniel," she said. Her voice was soft, worn smooth by years of use. "You came." "I did," he said, smiling awkwardly. "Didn't want to, but here I am." She laughed, a short, warm sound that caught him off guard. "Honesty suits you." He carried her firewood that first evening, fixed the crooked door in the barn, and checked the old stove. She moved slowly, each step careful, but her hands were sure when she kneaded the dough for supper. They ate in silence for a while, the kind of silence that wasn't heavy but full of small, unseen things. Outside crickets sang. The sun sank behind the birch grove, and the air turned cool. After dinner, Anna poured tea into chipped blue cups. "You look tired," she said. "I am," he admitted. "City life does that to you." "You've changed," she said. "There's less noise in your eyes now." He looked at her then, and for a moment something passed between them. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. Two people used to being unseen suddenly seeing each other. Days folded quietly into one another. Daniel rose early, chopped wood, fixed the roof, mended the fence. Anna watched from the porch, her shawl around her shoulders, sometimes giving him quiet advice. In the evenings they'd sit by the window, she knitting, he reading whatever book he found on the shelf. They spoke little, but every word mattered. He began to notice the way her eyes softened when she listened, how her laughter always came half a second late, as if she first weighed whether it was still right to laugh. And she began to notice his patience, the way he never complained, how he moved through the house like someone trying not to disturb the air itself. One afternoon rain came, slow, steady, almost tender. The garden shimmered. Daniel was inside, wiping mud from his boots when Anna called from her room. "Can you help me with the window? It's stuck again." He came in and saw her standing by the glass, the wind blowing the curtain around her shoulders. He reached past her to tug at the frame, his sleeve brushing her arm. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The rain pattered louder. He smelled lavender and smoke. Her breath caught, barely audible, and he felt a pulse in the silence. Not desire exactly, but awareness, a fragile bridge they hadn't meant to build. The window gave way. The spell broke. "Thank you," she whispered, looking away. He nodded, his throat dry. "You're welcome." After that, something subtle changed. They didn't speak of it, but their eyes met differently, with a kind of caution that came only when people knew there was something to be cautious about. One evening, near dusk, they walked down to the river. Anna held his arm. The path was uneven. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth. The water moved slow, almost lazy, carrying the sky's fading color. She told him stories then, of her youth, of dances in the village hall, of how her husband used to whistle off-key. Her voice carried both fondness and fatigue, like she was remembering someone else's life. "And you," she said after a pause, "you loved my daughter." "Still do." "Yes," Daniel said softly. "But it's not the same kind of love anymore. It's quieter now. Kind but quiet." Anna nodded. "Quiet things last longer." She looked out at the river, her hand still on his arm. He didn't pull away. The moment was simple, almost innocent, yet full, like a secret the world wouldn't understand. When they turned back, the first stars were out. He walked her home, the rhythm of their steps falling in sync. That night he couldn't sleep. The sound of rain on the roof had returned, steady and soft. He thought of her, not as his wife's mother but as Anna, the woman who had once danced, laughed, waited, endured. The woman who still saw beauty in the ordinary. He didn't want anything from her. Not touch, not promise. Just the strange, quiet comfort of being near her. The way her voice could make the house feel alive. In her room, Anna lay awake too. She could hear him turning in the next room, restless. She closed her eyes and smiled faintly, ashamed of how her heart responded to the sound. It was foolish, she knew. 70 years behind her, and still the heart remembered how to tremble. But it wasn't lust. It was something purer, the sweetness of being seen again, not as someone's mother or someone's past, but as a woman. The night stretched long and soft. Neither of them slept much. Outside, the rain fell gently, as if trying to keep their secret. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table, pale and golden. The storm had passed, leaving the air clear and cool. Daniel poured himself coffee, listening to the slow creak of the house as it woke. Anna appeared a little later, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep much," he admitted. "Rain does that," she said. "It brings thoughts you didn't invite." He nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. They ate breakfast quietly, bread, honey, tea. Outside, the garden glistened with dew. The world felt freshly made, as if time itself had paused to breathe. Later that day, Daniel fixed the gutter along the porch roof while Anna sat below, shelling peas into a bowl. She hummed a tune he didn't recognize. It drifted up softly, carried by the wind. "Is that an old song?" he asked. She looked up, smiling. "Older than you, I think. My mother used to sing it when she worked in the garden. I hadn't thought of it in years." "It's beautiful," he said. "So are many forgotten things," she replied. There was a pause, the kind that came naturally between them now, not awkward but full of quiet meaning. He watched her hands, slow and precise, each pea falling into the bowl with a small sound like rain on wood. He thought of how age looked different on her than on anyone else. It wasn't decay, it was clarity, the stripping away of everything unnecessary until only the essence remained. In the afternoons, they walked to the orchard. The apples were still small, green, hard. Anna moved slowly, her cane sinking softly into the earth. Daniel stayed close, ready to steady her if she stumbled. "Do you ever miss the city?" she asked once. "Sometimes," he said. "But it doesn't miss me back." She smiled. "That's how most places are. You leave, and they keep moving as if you were never there." He glanced at her. "And this place? It hasn't changed." "Oh, it has," she said. "Just quietly. Like people do when no one's watching." Her words lingered in the air long after. That evening, as twilight deepened, Daniel found her in the garden, trimming herbs. Fireflies had begun to appear, glowing softly among the leaves. He stopped for a moment, just watching her. The gentle slope of her back, the curve of her wrist, the way the lantern light touched her hair. She didn't notice him at first. She was humming again, the same melody. Something inside him ached, not desire, but a longing for something undefinable. Peace, closeness, the tenderness that time rarely allowed. When she finally turned and saw him, she smiled as if she'd known he was there all along. "Will you help me carry these in?" she asked. He took the basket from her hands. Their fingers brushed. It was nothing, a fleeting contact, yet it lingered in both of them long after the moment passed. Inside, the air smelled of rosemary and mint. She began to tie the herbs into small bundles while he lit the lamp. "Do you ever feel," she said slowly, "that life gives you certain people only when it's too late?" He looked at her across the table. The lamplight softened her features, turning her face into something timeless. "I think it gives them to us when we need them most," he said. She nodded, eyes glistening though she didn't look away. That's kinder, she whispered. As summer deepened, their routine became a kind of rhythm. Mornings with tea, afternoons of work, evenings of quiet companionship. Sometimes she would tell him stories from her youth. How she used to ride her father's horse across the meadow. How she fell in love for the first time during a harvest dance. He listened not because of the stories themselves, but because of the way she told them, like someone remembering a world that still lived in her heart. Other times she asked him about the city. Not the facts but the feelings. What does it smell like? She asked once. He thought for a moment. Exhaust, coffee, whetstone. Sometimes perfume, sometimes loneliness. She laughed softly. You make it sound almost poetic. Maybe loneliness always is, he said. The words hung between them like a secret. One day, Daniel found an old photo album in the cupboard. Pictures of Anna's family, her husband, her daughter as a child. He sat on the porch flipping through them until Anna came out, drying her hands on her apron. I haven't looked at those in years, she said, sitting beside him. She looks like you, he said, pointing at a photo of her daughter smiling in a field. People used to say that, Anna murmured. She has his eyes, though. They turned the pages slowly. The photographs faded from color to sepia, time softening the edges. There was one picture, Anna at 20, standing by the same porch, her hair dark, her smile wide and full of unguarded life. She was beautiful, Daniel said before he realized what he'd said. She. Anna smiled gently. You mean I was? He felt a flush rise to his face. Yes, you were. She looked at him, her expression unreadable, half amused, half tender. Careful, Daniel. You'll make an old woman believe she still matters. He met her eyes. You do, he said quietly. Neither spoke after that. The crickets filled the silence, and the air seemed to hum with something fragile, alive and unspoken. That night, when she went to bed, she stood by the mirror longer than usual. She touched her face, tracing the lines time had drawn there, and for a brief moment, she saw herself as he might have seen her. Not old, not young, but human. Real. In the next room, Daniel sat awake, listening to the faint creak of the floorboards, the soft rustle of her moving about. He felt both comforted and tormented by her nearness. He didn't want to want anything. But he did want her happiness, her laughter, her presence, the way she made silence bearable. He lay down, eyes open in the dark. In her room, Anna whispered a prayer. Not for forgiveness, but for understanding. For the strange, impossible grace of being alive enough to feel again. Outside, the night wind moved through the trees like a sigh. Two hearts, divided by 40 years, beat quietly beneath the same roof, out of rhythm, yet somehow in tune. Autumn crept in quietly, like a secret no one dared to tell. The mornings turned misty, and the air carried the scent of damp earth and apples beginning to rot beneath the trees. The world seemed slower, softer, as if the year itself had grown tired. Anna's strength began to wane. She tried to hide it at first, but Daniel noticed the small things, the way her hands trembled when she held a cup, how she paused halfway up the porch steps to catch her breath. "Let me do that," he said one morning, when she tried to carry a basket of laundry outside. "I'm not helpless," she replied, her tone sharp but weary. "I know," he said gently, taking it from her anyway. "I just want to help." She sighed, surrendering. "You make it very hard to argue with kindness." He smiled, but inside something twisted. Fear, perhaps, or sorrow, or both. The days shortened. Shadows fell earlier across the kitchen floor. In the evenings, Daniel lit the stove, and they sat by the fire while the wind whispered against the windows. Anna spoke less now. Sometimes she just watched the flames, her thoughts far away. "What are you thinking about?" he asked one night. "Nothing," she said at first. Then, after a long pause, "Everything. My life, the parts one remember, the ones I wish I didn't. The way time steals without asking." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and placed his hand gently over hers. She looked at him, startled, then didn't move away. Her skin was cool, thin, and soft like worn linen. They sat like that for a while, hands resting together between them, neither speaking, neither daring to breathe too loudly. Finally she said quietly, "You shouldn't look at me the way you do." He swallowed. "How do I look at you? Like I'm something you want to understand?" "Maybe I do," he said. "Maybe I already do." Her lips trembled, not from age this time but from something deeper. "Then be kind, Daniel. Understanding can be cruel." As the weeks passed, her body weakened. She refused to see a doctor. "It's just the season," she insisted. But Daniel knew better. He began to cook her meals, mend her shawl, and make sure the fire never went out. Once, she found him in the kitchen late at night, preparing soup. "You'll spoil me," she said softly. "I think you deserve that," he replied without looking up. She stepped closer, her voice a whisper. "You make me feel alive again. And that's dangerous." He met her gaze. "Then maybe it's a danger worth having." The silence that followed felt like a confession neither of them was brave enough to speak aloud. One evening, a storm rolled in from the hills. The wind howled through the orchard, bending the trees. Daniel went to secure the shutters, and when he returned, Anna was sitting by the window, her shawl slipping from her shoulders. "Come away from there," he said. "It's cold." "I like watching the rain," she murmured. "It reminds me I'm still here." He sat beside her, the thunder rumbling far away. She turned her head slightly toward him. "When you're young," she said, "you think love is a thing that happens only once, that it burns bright and then it's gone. But it isn't true. It can return in another form, softer, slower, like embers that refuse to die." He listened, his heart heavy. "Are you saying this is love?" he asked, barely above a whisper. She didn't answer right away. The lightning flashed, and for a moment her face looked ageless, caught between memory and now. "I'm saying," she said finally, "that I haven't felt this kind of peace in a very long time." He wanted to speak, to tell her how she had become the center of his days, how her voice filled the silence that once gnawed at him. But he didn't. Some truths lived better unspoken. The next morning she didn't come to breakfast. He found her still in bed, pale and tired. "Just dizzy," she said weakly when he rushed to her side. "It will pass." He sat on the edge of the bed. "You need to rest. I'll take care of everything. You already do too much." "It's not too much," he said. "It's what I want to do." She reached out, touched his cheek, the first time she had ever done so. Her hand was light, trembling. "You're a good man, Daniel," she said softly. "Better than most. Don't lose yourself here." "I'm not lost," he said. "Not anymore." Her eyes filled with something unshed. Gratitude, affection, fear. "Then maybe we're both found," she whispered. 4 days after that, she stayed mostly in bed. Daniel read to her. Poetry, old letters, anything with warmth in the words. He brought her tea, brushed her hair, opened the window when the air felt too heavy. Sometimes she would drift into sleep while he read, and he'd watch her, the rise and fall of her breath, the faint smile that played across her lips. He'd never known tenderness could feel so much like pain. One afternoon, as he sat by her bed, she stirred and said, "If you could go anywhere right now, where would you go?" He thought for a moment. "Nowhere. I'm where I want to be." Her eyes softened. "You shouldn't say things like that." "But it's true." "I know," she whispered. "That's what makes it so hard." As autumn waned, the orchard turned gold, then gray. Leaves gathered at the doorstep like forgotten letters. The air grew colder, sharper. One evening, Daniel helped her to the porch. She insisted on seeing the sunset. The horizon burned with fading light. Red, orange, then purple. "Do you see that?" she said. "That kind of beauty, it always feels like goodbye." He stood behind her, close enough to feel her warmth, but not touching. "Maybe it's not goodbye," he said quietly. "Maybe it's a promise." She smiled faintly. "You always find the kind words. It's easy when I mean them." She turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. The look they shared held everything they could never say: longing, gratitude, sorrow, and the strange joy of having found each other too late. When the sun finally disappeared, Anna exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me." He didn't answer. He just stood there as the wind moved through the trees, carrying with it the scent of earth and the whisper of something eternal. Inside, the fire waited. The night would be long. And yet, for the first time in years, neither of them feared the dark. Winter arrived like a soft sigh, covering the village in white and muffling the usual sounds. Snow drifted across the fields, piled high against the fences, and the river, once alive with summer's light, was now frozen and still. The world had slowed, and inside the house, the warmth of the stove felt like a fragile promise. Anna sat in her favorite chair by the window, a blanket across her knees, knitting slowly. Daniel brought her tea, setting the cup carefully on the small table beside her. "You've been quiet today," she said, looking up at him with eyes that still held their brightness despite the years. "I've been thinking," he said softly, "about everything. About the orchard, the garden, the rain, the nights by the fire, you." She tilted her head, faint amusement in her expression. "Me?" "Yes, you," he whispered. "For the first time in a long time, I understand what it means to feel alive." Her lips curved into a small, gentle smile. "Then maybe we've both been alive too late," she murmured. He knelt beside her chair, resting a hand over hers. The touch was light, careful, a bridge between two hearts that had learned to speak without words. Days passed slowly. The snow fell in quiet sheets, blanketing the garden and orchard. Daniel shoveled paths, carried firewood, and tended the stove, while Anna watched, sometimes offering directions or stories of winters long past. One afternoon, he found her looking at a small window overlooking the frozen river. "It's so still," she said. "It's hard to believe it moves underneath." "Life moves underneath everything," he replied. "Even when it looks frozen, it's still flowing." She nodded, absorbing the words. "That's comforting," she said, her voice a whisper. They didn't speak for a while, letting the silence stretch between them. But it was no longer an emptiness. It was shared space, a quiet understanding that had grown over months of work, care, and subtle glances. One evening, a firestorm swept across the village, wind rattling windows and snow swirling like mist. Anna shivered in her chair, and Daniel wrapped a thick blanket around her shoulders. "You're too kind," she said, her voice soft, almost vulnerable. "I'm only doing what matters," he replied. "You matter." Her eyes glistened, reflecting the firelight. "You always know the right thing to say." "I don't," he admitted. "I only know the truth I feel." For a long moment they sat like that, two souls intertwined in quiet companionship. Not lovers, not friends, but something that went beyond labels. A connection that was pure, honest, and tender. As December wore on, Anna grew weaker. She spent more time in bed, and Daniel adjusted his routine to her needs, reading to her, warming her tea, and keeping the house alive with soft light and warmth. One night, as he sat beside her, she reached for his hand. "Daniel," she whispered, "promise me something." "Anything," he said. "When I'm gone, remember this. Not the age, not the illness, not the years we never had. Remember the moments. The warmth, the rain, the orchard, the fire, the quiet nights." "I promise," he said, his voice thick. Her eyes closed briefly. "And don't forget. It's not love like people think. It's better. It's patient, enduring, and it doesn't need possession. You understand, don't you?" "I do," he said. "I do." She smiled faintly, the weight of years and sorrow lifting slightly from her expression. The days that followed were still and white. Snow fell heavier, muffling the sounds of the village. Daniel carried out the routines they had developed, but he also spent long hours simply sitting with her, letting the quiet speak for them. One morning she turned to him, her eyes sharp despite her frailty. "Daniel, do you think people ever truly understand each other?" "Sometimes," he said. If they're brave enough to listen without judgment. She nodded, a faint tear tracing her cheek. Then we have understood. Yes, he said. We have. They held hands, not out of desire, but out of recognition. Two hearts, divided by decades, finally speaking the same language. On the last night before the new year, Daniel sat by the fire as she slept. He watched the shadows dance across her face, tracing the contours of a life full of memory, resilience, and quiet beauty. He didn't fear her passing. He only feared forgetting the light she had brought into his life. In the early hours, the snow outside fell silent. Anna's breathing was steady, peaceful. Daniel thought of all the afternoons they had spent in the orchard, all the rain-soaked evenings, all the conversations that had never needed conclusion. When she finally passed, it was gentle, as if the world had agreed to hold its breath for her. Daniel stayed in the village through the winter, tending the house, the orchard, and the garden. And every time he looked at the window overlooking the frozen river, he remembered the quiet strength in her gaze, the warmth in her voice, the patience in her touch. He would never see her again in the world of the living, but he felt her everywhere. In the way the snow settled, in the way the wind whispered through the trees, in the slow movement of life beneath the ice. And he knew, with a deep and certain understanding, that their connection, rare, impossible, and pure, had changed him forever. Two hearts 40 years apart had found each other in a way that mattered more than years, more than presence, more than love as the world defines it. It was something eternal. And in the silence of the winter, Daniel smiled, feeling her there beside him, as real as the snow, as gentle as the fire, and as enduring as the river beneath the ice.